Most people who've heard of Alan Turing think he invented the question, can a machine think? Turing asked it, Turing defined it, Turing built the test. Except, that's not quite how it happened. By the time Turing sat down in 1950 to write Computing Machinery and Intelligence, the intellectual infrastructure for that question had been under construction for 250 years. A German philosopher had dreamed of mechanizing reason. A Victorian mathematician had turned logic into algebra. An English engineer had drawn up plans for a machine that could execute rules automatically. Turing didn't invent the question. He inherited it. By the end of this video, you'll understand what he inherited, what he did with it, and why the Turing Test, a thought experiment from 1950, still sets the terms of every serious debate about artificial intelligence today.
Plain Machine, AI in plain English.
This series traces the full story, from the first question of whether a machine could ever think, all the way to the systems on your laptop right now. It's a better story than most people realize. Let's get into it.
Let's start with something you already know how to do. You can tell when a conversation is going well. You felt it. The back and forth is easy. The responses are quick and relevant. The other person seems to understand you without you having to over-explain. And you felt the opposite. The stilted reply, the generic answer, the sense that something is slightly off.
You make this judgment constantly, and you make it entirely on the basis of behavior. You can't see inside someone else's mind. You have no direct access to whether another person is really thinking or simply producing very convincing outputs. You infer thinking from behavior. That's all any of us ever do. Alan Turing took this observation, this thing we all already do, and turned it into a formal test. His 1950 paper, Computing Machinery and Intelligence, opens with a proposal. Instead of asking the unanswerable question, can a machine think, he proposed a game. He called it the Imitation Game.
Here's how it works. You sit at a terminal. You can type questions, but you cannot see who or what is on the other end. Somewhere, responding to your messages, is either a human or a machine. Your job is to figure out which. If the machine can sustain a conversation convincingly enough that a significant number of questioners cannot reliably distinguish it from a human, Turing argued, we have no meaningful basis for saying it isn't thinking. Notice what he did. He didn't define thinking. He replaced a philosophical definition with a behavioral criterion. He didn't ask what is happening inside the machine. He asked what the machine can do. That substitution, from definition to criterion, from essence to behavior, is the founding move of artificial intelligence as a practical discipline. And here's where the inheritance from video 2 lands. Leibniz believed logic could be mechanized. Boole gave logic a formal algebra. Babbage proposed a machine that could execute rule-based operations automatically. What none of them had was a way to test whether any of it added up to something we'd recognize as intelligence. Turing provided the test. The lineage finally had a finish line. It's worth being precise about what the Turing test is and isn't, because the popular version and the actual version are not the same thing. Turing's original paper didn't set a pass threshold. He didn't say, if a machine fools 50% of questioners, it passes. What he said was more careful than that. He proposed the test as a way of dissolving a bad question. If a machine can perform indistinguishably from a human across open-ended conversation, the question of whether it really thinks becomes, in his words, meaningless. The test was always philosophical before it was technical.
He also made a specific prediction.
that by the year 2000, machines would be able to play the imitation game well enough to fool an average questioner 30% of the time over a 5-minute conversation. That prediction was roughly correct. In 2014, a chatbot called Eugene Goostman claimed to have passed, though the conditions were contested, and most researchers considered it a narrow result.
The more interesting observation is this. Passing the Turing test has become less meaningful the more capable AI has become. Systems that can write legal briefs, compose music, and generate photorealistic images don't pass the Turing test in any conventional sense. They've simply made the test's original framing feel increasingly limited. The bar moved. The question did not.
So, if the Turing test has been superseded, if modern AI makes it feel limited, why does it still define the conversation? Because it did something no previous framework had done. It gave the field a shared reference point. Before Turing, the question of machine intelligence was philosophical and fragmented. Different researchers were working from different definitions, asking different questions, measuring different things. Turing's test gave everyone, engineers, philosophers, psychologists, a common target. Agree or disagree with it, you had to engage with it. That's what a good thought experiment does. It doesn't settle a debate, it structures one. There's a deeper reason, too. The Turing test encodes a specifically pragmatist view of knowledge. If you can't tell the difference, there is no difference. That's a philosophical position, not an obvious one, and not everyone accepts it. But that tension between the view that output is all that matters and the view that something is happening inside that output cannot capture is still the central fault line in AI research today. Every time someone argues that a large language model doesn't really understand what it's saying, they're on one side of that line. Every time someone argues that if the output is correct, useful, and coherent, the question of real understanding is irrelevant. That's the Turing position. The test didn't just structure the field in 1950. It structured the argument you're still hearing today.
Here's the limitation the Turing test builds in, and it's an important one. Passing the Turing test, if a machine could genuinely do it, would only ever tell you one thing: that the machine behaves indistinguishably from a human. It would tell you nothing about what is actually happening inside that behavior. A philosopher named John Searle named this gap with a distinction that has become foundational to every serious conversation about AI. He called it the difference between weak AI and strong AI. Weak AI, his term for every AI system that has ever been built, simulates intelligent behavior. It produces outputs that look like understanding. It performs tasks that require intelligence when a human does them. But the system itself does not possess understanding. It executes. Strong AI would be something different. A system that doesn't merely simulate intelligence, but actually has it. A system for which thinking is not a performance, but a genuine internal state. No one has built strong AI. No one has come close. And crucially, no one has agreed on what evidence would even confirm it had been achieved. This is why the Turing test, brilliant as it was, has an inherent ceiling. It can confirm weak AI, behavioral equivalence, but it cannot confirm strong AI. A machine that passes the test might have genuine understanding, or it might be executing an extraordinarily sophisticated version of weak AI. The test cannot tell you which. When you hear someone say that a language model understands your question, or knows what it's talking about, or believes something, they are making an implicit claim about strong AI. When someone says these are just next token predictors, nothing more, That's the weak AI position. You now have the vocabulary to recognize that debate whenever you encounter it. We'll return to it when we get to large language models, where the stakes are considerably higher.
Now, here's what this actually means if you work with AI tools. The Turing Test isn't just a historical curiosity. It encodes an assumption that shapes how every AI product you use is designed, and understanding that assumption makes you a more intelligent user of these tools. The assumption is this: the goal of an AI system is to produce outputs that are indistinguishable from what a competent human would produce. That framing is everywhere. When you evaluate a ChatGPT response, you're asking, does this read like something a smart person would write? When a company runs an AI-generated email past you and you can't tell, the Turing criterion has been met. When you say a tool's output doesn't sound right, you're operating as the questioner in the imitation game.
Scenario 1. If you're a manager evaluating AI-generated content, reports, proposals, summaries, the weak AI, strong AI distinction gives you a sharper diagnostic than most people use. Ask not just, is this correct, but is this the kind of correct that only comes from understanding the problem? A weak AI system can produce the first. It may not reliably produce the second, especially in novel situations where there's no prior pattern to match. Scenario 2. If you're using AI tools in your workflow, the Turing test reframes what good output means. Plausible is not the same as accurate. Fluent is not the same as correct. The tool is optimized for indistinguishability, not for truth. This is why AI systems hallucinate with such confidence. The fluency comes from the architecture, not from the accuracy. Weak AI is very good at sounding right.
Scenario 3. The decision framework. When evaluating any AI output, ask whether you're running a Turing check or an accuracy check. A Turing check asks, does this read well? An accuracy check asks, is this right, sourced, and reasoned? Most professionals who get burned by AI outputs were running a Turing check when they needed an accuracy check. The test teaches you something about how to be a good questioner. In 1950, the questioner's job was to determine whether they were talking to a machine. In 2025, the machine passed the test. Now your job is harder. You have to decide whether passing the test is enough. So, did Alan Turing invent the question? No, but he did something more useful. He made the question answerable. Leibniz believed logic could be mechanized, but he had no test for whether it had been. Boole gave logic a formal algebra, but algebra alone couldn't tell you whether a machine was thinking. Babbage drew up plans for a rule-executing engine, but no one had defined what success looked like. Turing defined success. He said, if it behaves indistinguishably, that's enough. If you can't tell the difference doesn't matter for our purposes.
Whether you agree with that or not, the move was decisive. It gave the field of artificial intelligence a practical target and a philosophical argument that is still running 75 years later. Here is the one-line version of everything this video was building toward. Turing didn't ask, can machines think, out of nowhere. He asked it because 2 centuries of mathematicians had already built the tools to answer it. The test was always the end of a chain, not the beginning of one.
In the next video, we move to 1956, the year the field of artificial intelligence got its name. A group of researchers gathered at Dartmouth College for what would become known as the Founding Conference of AI. They came with a specific, audacious goal: to build a machine that could prove theorems, play games, and use language. What happened over the following decade, both the breakthroughs and the spectacular overconfidence, sets up everything that comes later in this series. And the reason that overconfidence happened
makes a lot more sense once you understand what Turing's test did and didn't actually prove.
That's video 4. It's a good one. Subscribe if you want the rest of the arc. Each video builds on the last, but they're designed to work as standalones if someone else finds the channel first. I've put together a one-page AI glossary, 30 essential terms, plain English, free. Link in the description. It's a useful reference for everything we're building in this series. This is Plain Machine. Thanks for watching.